So now I'm going to look at my next question in question C. Remember, we just solved for 113 milliliters, and so now I'm going to solve for 142 milliliters because each one of these volumes was a new condition. I already know from solving the last step that my initial volume, no matter what in this question, is 135 milliliters because this is my volume of the sample that I'm starting with. And my initial temperature, no matter what, is 11 degrees Celsius. Every single time in this question, they're wanting me to solve for the new temperature. I had already solved for 113 milliliters. That was in the last video. Now I'm going to focus on my new volume, which is 142 milliliters. I already know from isolating my variable that T2 is going to end up equaling V2 times T1 over V1. Remember, you can always practice by going V1 over T1 equals V2 over T2. Set this up so it automatically says V1 times T2 equals V2 times T1. You're solving for T2, so that means you're going to get T2 equals V2 times T1 over V1. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in my new volume, my V2. My V2 this time around is 142 milliliters. Remember, I'm focused on this part. My T1 is still 11 degrees Celsius. I can't use Celsius, I must use Kelvin, so I have to go ahead and plug in the rest of my formula, which is plus 273. So now this is in units of Kelvin. My denominator is V1, so this is 135 milliliters. If you take a moment and look at the practice that you just completed for 113 milliliters, everything else in your equation is set up identical. The only thing that's different is this part right here because that's your new V2. So now let's take a moment and check our units. I have milliliters in my numerator. I have milliliters in my denominator. I'm going to be left with units of Kelvin, which is what I want because I'm looking for the new temperature that's going to match the new volume. So I'm going to first put in my calculator 11 plus 273. And once I get my answer for that, I'm going to then multiply it by 142. I'm going to clear my numerator first. So 11 plus 273, get my answer, and then multiply that by 142. You should end up with 40,328. That's your numerator. Your denominator is just 135. So now, once I divide those two numbers, 4328 divided by 135, I get 298.7259259. This time around, and for every example for question C, I'm going to end up dealing with 3 sig figs. My original volume is my only real data because that's what actually existed. The new volume is what I was hoping it would get to. So for 3 sig figs, I'm going to end up using the 7 to bump up the 8, and I'm left with 299 Kelvin.